Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Good. So it's kind of weird that I'm here talking about shopping. I didn't really ever expect to be a student of shopping. I don't really like shopping, actually. There's probably some of you who relate to that. Not like my mom who goes to the mall on the weekend to unwind. Kind of strange. That's not me. But that's also a limited way, a narrow way of thinking about what shopping is. Shopping, and what I'd like to propose for this conversation, is that shopping is really about decision making. And so when we think about shopping, rather than think about it as the person who goes and does the grocery shopping, or maybe your sister who likes to go and buy clothes, or my mom who likes to go to the mall, I'd like to propose we think about it as this idea of decision making. And so if shopping is decision making, then so many of the things that we do each day could be encompassed in that. It could be where to go to school, what classes to take, what to do with our financial future, what kind of insurance to sign up for, an elective medical procedure we might do, should I get braces? Yes. And so if all of those things are shopping, then what we wanted to understand is, what does it take to get someone to say yes? And if you think about all the moments in your life where you have this journey where you've got to go from undecided to decided, what are the information sources that you include to sort of get you to a place where you feel comfortable and say yes? Whether it's a trip to Europe, whether it's to go out on a date with someone, right? What's the thing? What's the inputs that you use? And if you think about the inputs that we used to have, let's say if we were to have bought an appliance 10 or 15 years ago, what would you have done? You could have asked your father-in-law for information. You could have gone to the store. I suppose you could have ordered a CD-ROM at some point. Today, if we're going to buy an appliance, we can spend months, if we choose, reading reviews, talking to other shoppers online. We can ask for input on Facebook, and we might get, depending on the category we're looking at, we might get dozens or hundreds of emphatic responses. How do all of those sources go into our brain, go into our minds, and help us get to a place where we say, yep, I'm going to go ahead and purchase? So if you are familiar with marketing, have worked in marketing, have worked for brands or a retailer, you might have heard of this thing called the purchase funnel. Fortunately, most of us haven't heard of that, which if you haven't, just leave it that way. But the purchase funnel, the concept here is that when we're making a decision to purchase, to hand over that money, we go through this sort of process, right? We learn about something, and we get sort of an awareness going, then we sort of become educated, and then eventually we cross the finish line and we do what those marketers want us to do. And if they could just expose us to enough ads, certainly we would get over that finish line. Well, we had a hypothesis that this was actually an outmoded way of thinking about decision making, particularly in a world in which we have so many different inputs coming in from all of these places. We've got our mobile phones, our apps, social media, video games, right? All these different inputs. We felt like this idea that decision making was linear was really not the case anymore. It didn't seem like decision making has ever been really a logical process, and it didn't seem like we were kind of bumping along just in this sort of straight path. We felt that it was actually more something like a heat map or like a neuron firing in the brain, that's what maybe decision-making might look like. This is actually real data that we use to sort of create this idea of where people were going for information, how long were they thinking about their decisions for, where were they going for information? What sources of information were most influential? And our hypothesis, at the time I was working at a media lab in Los Angeles as a part of Interpublic Group, and we were talking to brands and retailers all the time who were asking us again and again, should I build an app? Is that gonna move more product? Should I don't know, get a Facebook campaign going? What should I do? And we didn't really have an answer. We were like, well, you could do this neat stuff, but we didn't have an answer to say if it was actually influencing people to buy. So we set about to do essentially several years, what became, we didn't really know what we were getting into at the time, studying shoppers over about 4 years. We studied shoppers across all different categories, thousands of shoppers, 50, 60,000 shoppers. And we looked at all of these issues that cause us to say yes. What are those things? And we revealed some really interesting patterns. So for example, and this kind of makes me popular at parties, if you care to invite me to one, I can tell you that shoppers use an average of about 10.4 sources before making a decision. And that's true for high and low consideration, what I like to call low consideration, quote unquote, categories. The reason I do that is because what we're seeing is that there really isn't anything such as low consideration anymore. Even the smallest decisions, whether you're gonna buy a new gluten-free cookie. I mean, if you care about gluten-free cookies, you might spend a lot of time researching that. And the numbers of sources that you use, we think, are a proxy for how considered that purchase is. So for example, before buying a car, on average, people use about 18 sources of information. Before giving their child an over-the-counter medication, they use almost 10. A little scary is that they actually use more sources of information to inform them to pre-shop when they're buying an iPod than selecting who they're going to vote for president. You know, these numbers are an amazing way to evaluate how decision-making is changing. And we saw year over year that these numbers of sources that shoppers were using were growing quite dramatically. In fact, from 2010 to 2011, we actually saw a doubling in the number of sources shoppers were using, right? It makes sense. There's more sources, we have more opportunities, we can do all the research we want, the internet never closes, we can just go online for hours at a time, and we can research all of these things. And that research helps us get to a place where we can say yes. An example that I like to give of this sort of changing shopper behavior, I've learned, by the way, I'm quite a neurotic shopper. Didn't know that in the past, but have learned through studying that I'm one of those shoppers that actually takes a long time to make up my mind. I thought I was a quite decisive person, but I actually like to spend a lot of time reviewing and researching and making sure that I feel good about my purchase. My husband, he will spend hours before we go to a theme park looking at all the videos associated with the different rides in the park, right? He will do this so that when we pass that camera as you fall down the splash mountain, he knows exactly what face to make, and he always has the best faces. And he's done that through, really, it's like, really, how do you do that every single time? How do you know where the camera is? I'm just hanging on for dear life. He's done the research to do that, right? And that's because that's something that he values. And that research itself is actually becoming a form of entertainment. The picture that you see behind me, I love this picture. There's two of them. So on the image on my right, you've got an image that represents the number of Google searches a day. The image on my left are human DNA. And I love putting these two images together because what I see here is that we are creating, in essence, a shopper DNA. A new shopper DNA, right? The way in which we experience digital media, the amount of information and content that we have coming into us is changing the way we process this information. And we as marketers, and by the way, if you're not a marketer, if you are a doctor or you're a hairdresser, think about all of these sources that shoppers are increasingly using to make a decision to come and do business with you, to engage with you as a brand, as a human being that's a brand, right? And so we've got to look at this portrait and say, how can we map that? And that's exactly what we did. We said, all right, We're learning more about shoppers than we've ever known because we've got new tools that enable us to map what they're doing. We can track social media in real time. We can talk to shoppers at scale in a way that was never before possible, right? You could do a few focus groups and one lady would say she didn't like it and that was the end of that product, right? And now we can scale that process. Now you would think that brands, maybe like the Intels, the Microsofts, the J&J's, you name it, right? You would think that these brands, all the research that they do, all of the bright people that they've got working for them, that they would know the answer to this very simple question: why do shoppers behave the way they do? You'd think they would know that question. And the truth is, when you get them over a beer, they will tell you that they actually have no idea. All the research they do, all the consumer research, flavor profiling, right? All these personas they create, and they actually don't know what causes you to say yes. So as we were studying this, we began to create a visual output of that shopping process, of that shopper journey. You're looking at an example behind me of one that we created while I was working for Shopper Sciences. And what this does is it takes what we like to call paid, earned, and owned media, that is to say traditional media like television, radio, and print, online digital media like all the stuff that you do online and mobile and social media, and then in-store effects like the associate that you talk to, or perhaps a sign that you see in store. And we mapped that process out. Where do shoppers go first? Where do they go after that? And then where do they go? And which of those things is most influential? Which of those things tips the scale? And if I were to ask you about a recent purchase decision that you might have made, we could have this dialogue, and you could probably say, well, yeah, actually it was my mother-in-law telling me that I don't need to make homemade cakes anymore, I can just buy the cake mix. That was pretty darn compelling, right? So we wanted to understand that. So this is a map of that, and this was pretty cool, and it drove some great results for our clients, and we were quite proud of it. But it actually wasn't enough, because all this is doing is mapping what's already happened. Which is why I moved to Winston-Salem from Los Angeles. I was introduced last year to what I like to call a little line of code. And this little line of code sits in the point of sale terminal at about 80% of retail stores in this country. And this little line of code, when turned on, communicates with the cloud, otherwise known as, the interweb. And it says, here's what's being purchased, here's what's not being purchased, here's what coupons are being used, here's what offers are being redeemed. And that little line of code delivers a ton of data. You've probably heard the word big data a lot. I hate that term right now because I'm hearing it everywhere I go. But humongous amounts of data, to avoid the use of the term big data. Humongous amounts of big data about what we're buying in real time. Right? So I could go to the store and it would acknowledge, yep, Devora, we've got Pellegrino here, she's buying 2, she just redeemed her coupon, right? And all of that's going up into the cloud. Just this little line of code that enables us to do that. And if we can get that kind of data coming in real time, massive amounts of data, we can actually move from mapping shopping to predicting it. So there is a changing sentiment that's happening. Shoppers are moving from this place of, well, yeah, okay, I'm going to work to cut out my coupons and do my research and get my deals, to a place of, you know what, my life's complicated, I'm busy, I don't have a lot of time, so please make it easy for me. Don't make me work for deals. Don't make me, go take care of all of your sweepstakes. Don't make me count points. Don't make me collect bottle tops. I'm not interested. If I shop you, you should know who I am, and you should be good to me. And if you're not, I'll take my business elsewhere. This starts to sound a little bit like Amazon, right? So as I talk about some of these things, sometimes people start to have panic attacks, and they're like, privacy, and what's going to happen to my data, and you're going to know that I buy red meat and I eat lots of it. But when Amazon does it, it's not so creepy, right? It makes sense. They see what you buy, they see what other people buy, they make associations about what people like you who buy things that maybe you're not buying today and what that might mean about you and what you might like to buy. And they serve you up recommendations. And when that happens, you go, well, that's pretty cool. And when they get it wrong, you actually get pretty annoyed, right? You're like, well, my mother-in-law was on my Amazon account, and now I'm getting all these jewelry making things, right? I don't want those. You get annoyed, right? Get it right. So in that context, it's not creepy, it's not weird, it doesn't feel invasive, it makes a lot of sense. And in fact, what we're seeing is that Amazon has now displaced a company, an amazing company like Nordstrom, like when that was like the pinnacle of customer service, right? You'd go to Nordstrom to have an awesome shopping experience. Nordstrom's now number 9, and actually this year they're now number 10. Amazon's number 1. How can it be that a company that you never ever meet an actual human being, they could have cyborgs working there, we wouldn't know, right? How could it be that that could be best-in-class customer service? How could it be that we would consider best-in-class customer service to be from a company whose 1-800 number you have to go to secret blogs to find? You have to go to forums and they'll be like, yeah, I got the number here, right? And they're nice once you talk to them, but how could that be best-in-class customer service? And the reason is that our expectations of what good service means are changing. And what we say is, I want you to know the products that I care about. And you should have them in stock. And you should recognize my buying patterns. And don't give me a coupon for dog food. I don't have a dog. Why are you doing that? Stop it. That is what is coming to be customer service in this new era, this future of retail. I had a colleague call me up recently, and he said, Devora, tell me about the retailers that are doing it right. Tell me about, the coolest augmented reality execution you've seen or a new social media campaign. I want to talk about that. And he was going to be making a presentation, and he wanted my input. And I said, well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I don't actually see that the future of retail, or what I would consider is really exciting, to be in some shiny new kiosk or social media campaign that a retailer does. I don't want new shopping experiences. I want better shopping experiences. That is, to me, the future of retail. And it actually takes us back to something that we might have known in the past. This idea of the general store, right? Where they'd reserve the products, they knew that you came in on Thursdays, and they'd set aside your favorite cheese. I used to live in Spain, and when I go back to the general store that's still there in this little town that I lived in, Esmeralda still knows my name, and she still will reserve my favorite manchego cheese when I'm there, right? She knows even years later the products that I care about and what matters to me. We can't do that at scale at retail. Any retailer who has, more than a store or two will tell you it's incredibly challenging. But we can do it through data. And if we can apply some of the data that we take in from that little line of code and some of the learnings that we're starting to understand about shopper behavior across thousands and thousands of shoppers, maybe we can create this sort of new golden era of retail. Maybe we can lay bare the walls of the retail store, right? Tear those down, grab the data that's floating around us in the air, shoppers commenting on products, shopper reviews of, different stores that they like and don't like. And if we can do this, we move as marketers from a place of manipulation and gimmicks and celebration to a relationship that's a lot more about listening. I don't have to guess what your needs are. I don't have to trick you. I can just simply listen to what you're doing and respond in kind. And that, my friends, is the future of retail. Thank you.